Thanks everyone for joining. We're just going to give it maybe another minute just to let a few more folks join. All right, we're going to get started. Welcome to today's webinar. My name is Patricio Portillo. I'm a policy analyst here at the National Governors Association. So today's webinar is focused on the U.S. Department of Agriculture's extensive efforts to expand broadband access in rural communities. The webinar will also take a deep dive into USDA's ReConnect Program. This webinar really builds on a lot of work that NGA is already doing, which is providing solutions and sharing best practices with states on broadband deployment. So today we'll be hearing from two excellent speakers from USDA. First we'll hear from Jannine Miller, who is Senior Advisor for Rural Development, and then we'll hear from Laurel Leverrier, who is the Deputy Assistant Administrator of the Telecommunications Program. But before we get started, just a quick housekeeping item. So we have a lot of time scheduled at the end for Q&A, so please submit your questions throughout the webinar, either using the GoToWebinar taskbar on the side, or you can email them directly to me at portillo@nga.org. So with that, I think I'll turn things over to Jannine.
Great, thanks, Patricio. This is Jannine Miller with U.S. Department of Agriculture, Secretary Perdue's office, and special thanks to Patricio and all the team at NGA for setting this call up, for understanding the importance of rural infrastructure, and particularly in this case, rural broadband. And thanks to you all out in states who are dialing in and spending your time with us today. We can hardly think of a more important domestic policy imperative than modernizing our infrastructure throughout the country, but particularly in rural America, and we're just delighted to have you on with us. Joining later and presenting later will be Laurel Leverrier, who is one of our leaders at our broadband programs at USDA. And we have several programs that have been long-standing, decades-long, and we'll talk with you about those later. And we're going to focus mostly as we get further into the presentation here. Our main focus will be on the ReConnect program, which you may have heard about through various avenues. Is a brand new program that we're able to be really innovative with thanks to the congressional appropriation. So let me get started, and I'll just we'll click over to the next slide here. What you can see there is, I guess I'm going. Sorry about that. Okay, there you see a photograph, I'm sorry, of Secretary Sonny Perdue with the motto that he has brought to the Department of Agriculture, and it's the words by which we do our work every day: do right and feed everyone. And there are multiple ways that the Department of Agriculture carries that out. I was surprised to learn about the work that is done at rural development. It's one of our mission areas, or kind of sub-departments, if you will. When I worked for Governor Perdue, and he was the governor of the state of Georgia, we didn't have a whole lot of interaction with USDA through rural development, because most of their programs, most of the USDA programs, go directly from the federal government to local governments and local private sector providers or cooperatives, private companies. So there may not be a great deal of interaction that occurs or has occurred historically between state governments and Department of Agriculture for rural infrastructure. We hope we're starting to change that paradigm here, thanks to the leadership of Governor Perdue, or Secretary Perdue. We're excited to be able to do this work on behalf of rural America. Of course, on his first day in office, he was given an executive order by the president to explore what is necessary for rural prosperity in our country. Throughout all states, we have rural areas that federal government either impacts more than it should or needs to have more impact. And so with a multi-agency approach, we had to go forth and identify legislative, regulatory, and policy changes that were all about economic growth in our rural countryside. We took this very seriously. It was a 6-month effort. We had more than 24 agencies involved, countless hours of both cabinet level participation, as well as all of staff and leadership throughout those federal agencies. And what we did is took a look at rural prosperity along the pillars of economic development that we know have been successful over the decades: economic development, access to capital, tax reform, and infrastructure, global market access, as well as innovation and technology, workforce, and quality of life. These are the pillars or ways to categorize the role of government in supporting economic development and economic prosperity in prior centuries. And what we've realized for the next century's success, broadband e-connectivity is absolutely necessary to support all of these activities in the private sector and ways that the government can get involved and support. In fact, broadband e-connectivity is truly a modern-day equivalent to rural electrification that was passed by President Roosevelt and Congress back in the mid-30s, as well as rural telephone, but also the interstate highway system in the mid-50s when it started. It soon became must-have. Roadway infrastructure was must-have, and that is what we're seeing now with broadband infrastructure that is needed throughout rural America. Now, I will say, it's important to note that although in probably the past 7 or 8 years, there has been a decline of rural population, that actually has started to uptick again. This past year, our data shows that rural population has started to grow once again, which is good. And it certainly is about our citizens' quality of life and ability to make the most of all aspects of our country. But I will say that it's really important to note how much importance rural countryside, rural productivity really has for our nation. We know that in rural areas is where our predominance, of course, of our farms and ranches and forest areas are located. That is, of course, necessary to feed our country and feed the world, as well as the fiber that comes from, of course, our forests and timber and cotton and the paper and pulp industry. That is all housed in rural America. We also know productivity in rural America also comes from manufacturing, where we're seeing growth in manufacturing, we're seeing reshoring of factories is to rural areas, and these industries absolutely need broadband in the future decade and century. So with this Ag and Rural Prosperity Task Force recommendations, we were able to come forward with 5 recommendations of the federal government to make this work, make this really impactful for our citizens and businesses in rural America. First, establishing executive leadership, and the president has led on that with the Broadband Interagency Working Group, which is now called the American Broadband Initiative, of more than 24 federal agencies, and I'll talk more about that in a moment. Assessing the state of rural e-connectivity. One of the findings there you see in that bullet, global average internet speed, there was an analysis that was done last year that U.S. ranked number 10 on internet speeds compared to other nations, mostly behind Europe and some in Asia. And only 67% of internet use in the United States is above 10 megabits per second. However, if rural connectivity and rural speeds were as high as metro broadband speeds, we would be in rank number 3 in the world. So it is rural connectivity that we really need to focus on for our nation's competitiveness. Number 3, reducing regulatory barriers to infrastructure deployment is absolutely necessary. Facilitating the more easy use of federal assets to deploy broadband infrastructure, towers, and fiber, and just being a better business partner to the private sector as the build-out needs to occur. 4, assessing the efficacy of current programs and really maximizing the impact. And we've got an effort underway. We're inventorying and working to coordinate resources at more than 50 programs throughout the government. All of this is being done to do number 5, to incentivize private capital investment. So the American Broadband Initiative is what is housing all of this work, again, under the leadership of the White House in conjunction with the Department of Commerce and U.S. Department of Agriculture. More than 2 dozen other agencies are making federal assets easier to find and use for telecommunications infrastructure, availing more federal assets, more buildings, more land for towers and fiber build-out, and increasing the effectiveness of taxpayer funds that are spent on rural broadband. And you can find this report that was released on February 13th. It can be found at usda.gov/broadband. I'd encourage you to take a look there. For state governments, it actually can provide a very good roadmap or a framework or model to do the same work in your state governments, availing state assets and removing regulatory barriers, as well as if your state has its own grant programs, or even where federal funds are being spent in your states, improving all of those regulatory processes will really have a huge impact for your rural citizens and businesses. One of the things that we're also doing in this assessing the state of connectivity is related to the economic benefits of broadband for precision agriculture. We've got an analysis underway right now that is looking at ways to lower farmers' input costs, increase farmers' and ranchers' yields, and improving market access and market coordination and sales. Through research of publications that have already been issued, we've been able to review row crops, specialty crops, and livestock along things like precision seeding and fertilizer and precision irrigation, monitoring livestock, managing crops, smart logistics, digitizing marketing and sales, even weather modeling and making sure Internet of Things and logistics is possible. All of these things we're finding require broadband to be at their greatest potential for our country. And we're very much looking forward to that work and that research coming out in the coming month or so. And we'll hope you'll take a look at that as helping make the business case for rural broadband. A couple of examples of things that we found in precision agriculture technologies, things that are being used out there today. There you see a robotic strawberry harvester. That is a robot picking strawberries in Florida. There's a crop monitoring robot, almost like a Roomba, for crops that can go and check out the soil conditions, check out for plants and pesticides and irrigation needs as it rolls through the rows. And these are just a couple of examples of a plethora of dozens of technologies that we've been evaluating for how much connectivity supports these things working in the field. And this is kind of probably one of my most favorite is the cow facial recognition is occurring today and will occur more and more as the market demands it, to ensure that milk in our refrigerators came from the type of cow that we might have been interested in. In other words, rural broadband connectivity is important for urban citizens as well, as we care about tracking and tracing, as we care about the quality of our food supply. So with that, I get the chance to introduce ReConnect. And this is our program that for the first time ever, we're at USDA able to give scoring points and priority to connecting farms to broadband, but also to connecting schools, libraries, pre-K sites, as well as healthcare facilities such as hospitals, clinics, even pharmacies. We're giving criteria, scoring points to connecting businesses, to connecting rural areas. New innovations that, because the way Congress wrote the law for us, we were able to put some innovative approaches to public policy into these funds. And it's actually a very exciting time to be able to talk with you about this. It started back in last Congress appropriated the dollars. We announced the program December 13th with Secretary Perdue press release, but you can find the Federal Register notice on the funding opportunity announcement in the December 14th publication of the Federal Register, available online, but it's also available at the website you see at the bottom of the screen there, reconnect.usda.gov. So in March, we have been working over the past month or so to get more information out about application deadlines. Because the federal government, or parts of the federal government, including us, were shut down for about a month, we weren't able over that period of time to give support and answer questions to those who are seeking information about the program. So we have just extended the deadlines, and you can see them there at the bottom of the screen, and Laurel will talk more about those later. But it's really important for you all as governors to take a look at that May 31st deadline, as any applications that come into USDA are needing to have a letter from the governors in the state reflecting how supportive your state and your state governor's office, state government in total, is supporting rural broadband. So by May 31st is the date by which that letter has to be complete from you all to USDA, and we'll talk more about that in detail later. Other dates coming up for the different types of fund sources available late June and mid-July. Again, more information on that will come soon. And from here, I'm going to turn it over to Laurel to talk further about managing the program. But this is one of the most exciting things, is the long list of potential applicants here, that we've not yet had this volume of funds available to provide broadband to a broad array of entities. So Laurel, I'm going to let you take it from here.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Jannine. So as you were pointing out, this program, eligible entities, is very wide open. So we can work with private companies, for-profit, nonprofit. We see a lot of cooperatives come in, county governments, cities, municipalities, even state governments. A couple things I would sort of put in folks' mind as you're thinking about who can apply. Essentially, any type of entity except for an individual or a partnership is eligible to apply for this funding. You need to keep in mind that whoever applies for the funding is ultimately, if they're awarded funds, going to have a legal contract with us here with the U.S. government. So whoever is applying needs to be able to own the facilities that we're financing and be able to contract with the federal government. And also ensure that the broadband service is being provided. So while we have a lot of different entities that can apply, and we hope to see a really wide array of entities apply, I would just encourage folks to be mindful of that ability to own and operate the facilities that we're financing under the grant or loan. So moving on, you can see under this first round of funding for our ReConnect program, we've provided 3 different types of funding options for folks. So I'm actually going to start on the right-hand side of this slide and work our way over. So starting with the 100% grants, as Jannine noted, the deadline for the 100% grant applications is May 31st. To apply for a 100% grant, there is a 25% match. Awards are, folks can apply for an award up to $25 million, though we will accept applications below that level, but 25 is the max. And anyone applying for funding under that program would have to commit to building out broadband service of at least 25/3. During this first round of funding, we've made $200 million available for 100% grants. And actually, we've made $200 million available across each of our buckets. So for each category of funding, we have $200 million that we're making available during this first round. So next in the middle column, we have our combos. So these are 50-50 loan grant combinations. So max award is $50 million, of which you could apply for up to $25 million in grant and $25 million in loan. Similar to the 100% grants, applicants, if they are approved for an award, will have to deploy broadband service of at least 25/3 to all of the premises that they apply to serve. So we don't require that every single premise within that area subscribe to the service, but our grantees, our recipients of funding, have to make service available to anyone within the area which they are requesting funding from. I would point out that the 50-50 loan grant combinations and the 100% grants are going to be scored. So we'll talk a little bit about that as we get further into the presentation. But just know that ultimately we'll take those who are eligible and complete, and then we will score them, and whoever scores the highest of those eligible and complete applications is who will receive the funding up to that $200 million we have available. For our 100% loan applications, those applications are due July 12th. The maximum award is $50 million. Similar to our other products, awardees will be required to build out broadband service of at least 25/3. The thing that is a little bit different about the 100% loans is that these will not be competitively scored. So essentially, the application window will open, and we will review and award on an ongoing basis based as they come in. So there would be a competitive advantage for those loan products for the kind of early applicants who come in. And ultimately, we'll be looking at those to see, are they eligible, complete, financially feasible, and then we'll be making awards on an ongoing basis. So keep in mind, May 31st is the grant deadline, June 21st is the 50-50 combo deadline, and July 12th is the deadline for all 100% loan applications. So as I was mentioning, the grant funding that we're making available will determine who to give awards to based on, first, who's eligible and complete, but then also a scoring component that we've put together. So you can see on this slide all of the components. There's 150 points possible. So we will be giving points based on rurality, based on the type of entities that are served. So we want to see farms being connected, health care centers, tribes, educational facilities, critical community facilities, all of that, as well as businesses. And then there is this state broadband activity. And this is something, I'll be honest with you, in my 15 years at USDA, I'm not aware of us ever doing, at least in our telecom programs. And that is providing 20 points for state broadband activity. So I can tell you that in talking with our applicants, this is an area they're very focused on because everyone wants to obviously max out the amount of points they can get. And 20 points to the 150 total can come from state broadband activity. So let's talk a little bit more about what we mean there. So those 20 points are broken up into 3 basic buckets. 10 points for broadband plans, 5 points for states that don't restrict utilities, and 5 points for expediting right away. So what does that mean? Essentially, what we're requiring from our applicants is a letter from the state governor where their project will be located, speaking to these 3 things. And so first off, we want to see, is there a broadband plan in place? We've not prescribed what all has to be in that broadband plan because we acknowledge that states have different needs, different issues that they would need to address. A plan in Mississippi could be very different than one in Alaska or in Wyoming. And so we want to give a lot of discretion to the states as they're putting together their plans based on the needs in their state. So what is there? First off, we put a time restriction on it. So essentially we said, we don't want a plan from 10 years ago that's completely out of date. We want to see plans that have been put in place within the last 5 years. And we want to see a link to a website where that plan is available. So we could take a look at it so people in the public are aware of it. And so essentially it's a pretty broad idea in that we're giving a lot of discretions to states to say what's in that plan. From our perspective, we're most interested in states having a plan that sort of outlines what it is they want to do or what they see needs to be done. So 10 points right there for states that have a broadband plan, and we'll give points for those broadband plans for applicants that include a letter from their governor's office. So that's a really big component of this, is not only that the plan is there, but that we are made aware of that. 5 points for states that don't restrict utilities from delivering broadband service. So there's a couple different issues that are kind of in play in the industry. I would say, for example, one of them is there's some states that restrict electric utilities from providing broadband service. And so what we're looking at is giving an additional 5 points to projects that are located in states that have no restrictions. Just like with the state broadband plan, we're going to be looking to the state governor's office to give us that information. So we've informed our applicants in our funding opportunity announcement, hey, this is how you get these plans. And we'll also be communicating with the states themselves, but wanted to make sure that was very clear to you guys. And then finally, we're giving 5 points for states that expedite right-of-ways and environmental requirements. So we're under very tight timelines for construction of these facilities and these projects. And so we're really looking for states to put their stamp on and say, yep, that they will help expedite right-of-way environmental requirements and help keep the projects moving. So
Laurel, can I jump in for just a second on the environmental review?
Absolutely.
What I want to make sure of is clear is this is about expediting the administrative process of right-of-way and environmental permitting. It is not for the sake of anything other than the administrative part of this. We are still looking to do full environmental protections where necessary and full protection of personal private property. What we are just hoping is that if and where it might be necessary, if we're coming up against some hurdles at state government, that the governor's office is aware of the project and will jump in to help ease and quicken any administrative procedures. Thanks, Laurel. Go ahead.
Great comment. Thanks. No, that's wonderful. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about some available resources. So for you all that might want to learn more about this program, for constituents out across the country, we've got a number of different ways that we're providing information. So first and foremost, we have workshops that we are planning all across the country. So we're planning 6 in-person regional workshops. These will be 2-day workshops that folks can attend. So this is a great way for someone who's interested in applying or wants to know more about the program to come in person and listen from and hear from our experts. We're also hosting webinars. So this is something we're doing very regularly, about once a week. We started with some high-level webinars just kind of on 101, what is the program, and we're going to be breaking that out into more in-depth content, really focusing in on the financial engineering and the environmental requirements of the program. And all these schedules are available on the reconnect.usda.gov. If you click on events, and all of that information is there where you can register and see about upcoming events. Resources, so I've already mentioned our ReConnect website, but there's a lot of information there. We've got a slew of FAQs that can be informative for folks, see what other people are asking, as well as a way for you to actually ask us questions through our portal. So there's a contact us, ask for help, and you can submit questions into that and get a response back from our experts. Just a little bit more detail on our upcoming workshops. So I mentioned that we would be having 6 workshops total. Right now we have 4 that are scheduled. And actually, if you go to our events site, you can go ahead and register for these events. So our first one will be April 2nd to 3rd in Washington, Pennsylvania. Then we've got Tucson, Arizona, Junction City, Kansas, and then we're headed out to Oregon. Our 2 additional events will be held in May, and so we'll release more detail on those events as they are available. So a lot of different ways, whether you want to listen to a webinar online or actually come and be in person at one of our regional workshops to really get some hands-on assistance for folks that are applying. So that's kind of a high-level overview on our ReConnect program. There's a lot of resources out there. We're doing a lot of different marketing webinars, workshops, and we're also happy at the end of this call to answer some more questions about it. I did want to take a couple minutes to kind of just give a little broader view of what we're doing here at USDA associated with broadband. So I think Jannine kind of hit on at the beginning some really cornerstone things for us, when we're talking about direction from the White House and from the Secretary. Obviously, e-connectivity is a real priority for us. And so across the entire department, we are really working to see what steps that we can take to help close the digital, really extend broadband service to the most unserved areas. So I want to highlight, in February, we released our e-connectivity toolkit. So that's essentially a toolkit that we've put in place that features over 27 different USDA programs that can support broadband deployment. Now, all 27 of those programs are not 100% about broadband, but those programs can support broadband infrastructure in some way. And so we wanted to put that guide out there to help folks in a kind of easily digestible table format that kind of asks you who you are and what it is you're trying to do. If you've not taken a look at our e-connectivity toolkit, I would definitely recommend you can access it by going to usda.gov/broadband, and there's a link to our toolkit, as well as some great information about our various programs. So this slide is focused in on 4 of those 27 programs. So this is what I like to call our 4 long-standing telecom programs. So as I mentioned, those 27 programs across USDA, they all are not entirely focused on broadband, but they can maybe be used to help facilitate. These 4 programs on this slide, similar to our ReConnect program, are entirely focused on broadband and e-connectivity in rural communities. So we wanted to make sure that before you all jet off home, that we make sure to highlight these programs so there's an awareness that you all have about some of these other important programs in addition to our ReConnect program. So first and foremost, we've got our telephone loan program, or telecom loan program. This is our program that's been around since the 50s. It started extending telephone service, and today it does broadband infrastructure. We receive $690 million every year in funding for this program. So there's certainly of all of our programs, as you can see on this slide here, has the most annual funding that we have available. So $690 million available each year to help broadband applicants. What can the program be used for? Well, the program purpose is similar to our ReConnect program, to construct, maintain, improve, and extend broadband infrastructure. So one thing that's a little different about this program is its rurality definition. It serves rural communities of 5,000 or less. All of our other programs, including ReConnect, are focused on communities of 20,000 or less. So they have a little bit higher population threshold. So this one is focused more on really rural communities. There is a large variety of entities that are eligible, but I will tell you primarily this program is focused on ILEC. So your local exchange carrier, traditional telephone companies are the primary users of this program. We also have our Farm Bill Broadband Loan Program. It's very similar to the ReConnect program. It does not, in that it is there to extend broadband service. But right now that program is a 100% loan program, so there's no grant component. We will have somewhere around $30 million in funds available this year. And you can see when you compare the fiscal year 2010 to present, obviously a substantial drop in the level of activity we have in that program. So if you can compare our telecom loan program that has provided over $2.8 billion in funding since 2010, our Farm Bill Broadband Loan Program is much smaller, and it's only provided $225 million in funding. So you can see folks that are eligible for the telecom loan program, there's a lot more money there. People tend to go that way. I should mention about the Farm Bill Broadband Loan Program that there are some statutory changes to that program that will expand and provide grant funding to it, but right now it's a strictly 100% loan. Next, we go to our Community Connect grant program. It is a 100% grant program. We receive about $30 million each year for that program. Grant applications are limited to $3 million or less, so we're looking at much smaller projects than we are, say, in the ReConnect program. And there's a 15% matching fund requirement. So in contrast, the ReConnect program, we can do a lot larger project, but there is also a higher matching fund requirement. There's a 25% matching fund requirement for ReConnect 100% grants, whereas in Community Connect, it's a 15% grant match. And then finally, we get to our distance learning and telemedicine grant program. It is also a 100% grant program. It also has a 15% matching fund requirement. We, in fiscal 19, we have $47 million in funds that are available to the program. This program is different than the other programs we've talked about today because while it supports broadband infrastructure, the purpose of it is to finance the equipment that's needed for distance learning and telemedicine service. So all of the other programs, the other three I talked about on this slide and our ReConnect program, they're all about the broadband infrastructure and laying that infrastructure and extending it. Whereas our distance learning and telemedicine program is all about the equipment needed for distance learning and telemedicine. It's a wonderful program. It's very competitive, but we work with a lot of hospitals, community colleges, and it's really great when we can especially partner one of our maybe say large telecom loan applications, and then we get to complement the infrastructure there with the distance learning and telemedicine grant. So we have general field representatives located all across the country who are there and available to assist applicants who have questions about our program. They're also there to help you all if you guys have questions. So you can see we've got names, last names of, and you can see the boundaries of our GFRs. Some GFRs only manage one state, some have multiple states. We basically do that based on the workload. So the level of number of entities and clients we have in a particular geographic area. You can see up in Iowa, for instance. It's kind of a smaller state, but we do a lot of activity in that state. And so there's a lot of resources that are needed to support those projects. You'll see at the bottom there that URL for usda.gov/contact US Telecom GFR. If you go to that site, you can actually choose your state and you'll see contact information for those GFRs. So here's kind of, you can see generally the areas that those GFRs cover, and you can actually get their contact information by going to that URL. And we would encourage you to do that. They're a great resource. You know, they're there to help answer questions. So if you have questions later on, you're welcome, days from now, you're welcome to email Jannine and I, but those GFRs are also there to assist you if you have questions. So on this slide, and I apologize, there is a lot of words and a lot of text on this slide. I haven't made it really pretty yet, and I don't intend to actually go through each of these sections with you all. What we wanted to make sure that all of you were aware of is that in December of 2018, the Agriculture Improvement Act was passed. We call that the Farm Bill. So the 2018 Farm Bill passed in December, and that statute made a number of changes to our program and also opened many new opportunities for us at the department to extend broadband service. So we just there is a number of sections that impact our programs, but to me, these are the ones that I thought would be most interesting for you all and the ones that you probably wanted to be aware of. So first off, our broadband loan program, as I mentioned, it's currently a 100% loan program. The 2018 Farm Bill actually provides authority for us to provide grants as well as to do payment assistance, which essentially means we can lower someone's interest rate. So we will be working to implement those requirements, but that is a great opportunity for us to add sort of some grant funding to that loan program to really help make some projects financially viable in our rural communities. The Farm Bill also established or authorized us to create a new program, an innovative broadband advancement program that really just looks at projects that would demonstrate innovative broadband technologies. That's kind of fun for us because there's not a lot of statutory requirements, so we'll see, but wanted to make you guys aware of that. Our Community Connect program, actually they codified in this version of the Farm Bill, so they pretty much took the regulation we had in place and made that statutory, made a couple little tweaks for it, but that was pretty exciting for us in that currently that program had just been being authorized under the appropriations bill every year. Also, Section 6214 established a broadband integration working group. So that essentially was Congress saying, no, you are going to create a working group across federal agencies. And what's exciting about that is a lot of the work we've been doing with the American Broadband Initiative actually will help us to address that requirement. And then finally, we've got precision agriculture. And so there's a task force that's being required to be created with the FCC and the USDA to really look at that. So again, I don't want to get too far in the weeds, but some pretty exciting things for us we're seeing coming out of Congress. So lessons learned from, not from DC, lessons we've learned from the nation. So, you know, broadband is a private sector business, but it needs government support to make a business case in certain rural communities. And so what we're seeing is the importance of government and nonprofits working together. And when I say government, we're not just talking about at the federal level, but also at the local, state level. So we need to create partnerships that can work together. And really the broadband gap cannot be filled either by the private sector or the government alone. So we're seeing a need to leverage all sources across federal, state, and private sector, and promoting partnerships that can really create long-term successful organizations to handle and tackle this issue going forward. And as I already said, really, we can't do it alone. There's a lot that we need state governments to assist with. First off, let me just get this out. So we're just going to do this. And I'm going to share a couple thoughts, and then I'm going to let Jannine speak up and add to kind of what we've got here. But really for you all, we're really looking for ways that you can reduce impediments to rural broadband, including removing limitations on the types of entities that can provide broadband, creating a process to help minimize overbuilding or duplicating. So for states that have a broadband plan and they have a broadband program, making sure that we're not duplicating each other, ensuring that we're streamlining and improving the permitting process, and really making all available resources to be put towards broadband. Jannine, other thoughts that you wanted to add?
Yeah, thanks, Laurel. I know that broadband, maybe for some states, was part of the Stimulus Act, and there's a lot of activity about 10 years ago. And maybe since then, state governments haven't really been in the game, except for a handful of those that have been working pretty hard: Minnesota, Wisconsin, Tennessee, and the like. But there really is a role for state government as we enter this next century and this next stage of rural infrastructure imperative. And this is sort of a roadmap of things that can be done: creating the plan with goals and a mapping strategy, technical and financial support for communities, reducing impediments through streamlined permitting, and supporting broadband adoption initiatives. These are all things that might sound or seem new to many state governments, but there are best practices in several states around the country. There at Department of Commerce, our partners over there run a program called the State Broadband Leaders Network, and that is an excellent source for you all in governor's offices, and many of your states are probably already plugged in to Commerce's State Broadband Leaders Network. And I would encourage you to reach out to your contacts there in your state who are your broadband managers, your broadband secretaries or commissioners, or any of those, maybe at your public utilities commissions, your Department of Economic Development or Community Development, maybe even in technology offices, might be your broadband point of contact that is already plugged into the State Broadband Leaders Network. If they're not, just let Patricio know, and he can get you connected with them over there at the Department of Commerce, and we're also happy to help out there. This program, ReConnect program, is a little bit different than maybe some other federal funds you're accustomed to. They don't flow to or through state governments. They'll go directly from federal to local entities or private entities. But there's still a lot of work that we need state governments to help their rural communities get in the game. And I hope you're able to see that today. The last thing I'll say is I do want to just let you know about the money itself. Laurel said we've got $600 million that is available or has been announced so far. That number will increase. We know that some of the way that the loan money works at the federal level, that's going to leverage up. So that $600 million is going to look something more like $800 million or $1 billion worth of projects. Additionally, Congress just appropriated an additional $550 million to this same ReConnect program. So all in all, we're talking somewhere between a total of $1.5 to $2 billion maybe worth of projects for rural broadband. We think that number is going to continue to grow. There's been a great deal of interest, continued interest at the congressional level and at the administration to the federal government being a partner with private sector to make this happen for rural America. So I'll close with that and turn it over to Patricio to moderate any questions.
Thank you, Jannine and Laurel, for that great overview. So we've had a number of questions come in via email and through the chat. So I encourage you all to submit them now if you have them. I'm trying to work through them all. So one common question was, will there be a copy of this, the slides and the PowerPoint shared after? So we're recording the webinar, and it's going to be posted on our website after the fact. If you registered, you should also receive an email containing the recording as well. And we'll also be posting the PDF of the slides, if that's all right with Jannine and Laurel, to our website as well. And then to get to some more specific questions that have come through, so one was, can multiple providers receive grants or loans for the same or overlapping service territory?
Great question, and the answer is no. We have too few federal dollars to spread out to far too many areas of our country. So we are not allowing duplication of services as best that we can ascertain. And Laurel, do you want to fill in any blanks there?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, our intention is to limit our funding because we know that there's no way we can reach everybody, especially if we keep funding the same area. So absolutely not. We have procedures in place that will keep us from providing grant or loan funding to multiple entities to serve one area.
Okay, thank you. So another question that came in, if utilities are allowed to create subsidiaries that can deliver broadband, would this qualify for the 5 points that you showed?
Yes.
Okay.
And the governor's letter will need to affirm that. Once again, we'll be sending out a letter to all governor's offices, so all of you should receive it. And the instructions in there are pretty explicit, but will be available after you get that if you've got any further questions.
Okay, thank you. So we just got a number of questions coming in. 1 second, I'm going to try and sort through these. You mentioned a deadline to complete construction. When is the deadline to complete?
Yep, so all facilities have to be constructed within 5 years of when we make the funding available. So there'll be kind of we'll award the funding, and then we'll have for maybe 6 months where folks will be working with us to enter into the actual legal contractual arrangements with us. And then once that's done, we will, what we like to call, release the funding, meaning that we don't just advance all the money, but applicants can start requesting the money from us. At that point, then entities will have 5 years to complete their build out.
Okay, thank you. So another question was around IoT. What about the narrowband IoT connectivity, like LP1 for rural sensor connectivity?
That sounds like a highly technical question. Let me say that we use the term broadband because that is an encapsulation of the high speed, high capacity, low latency, high reliability data flows. And we have, our own attorneys have done a good analysis of what is, quote, considered broadband, what the law requires of programs to fund broadband and what that is. It essentially cannot fund mobile service. It cannot fund mobile, quote, broadband. But it can, our programs can fund fixed wireless, so that if you got fiber going out to a tower and can ping subscriber-based wireless from that point, that would function as a broadband in our definitions. Laurel, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, no, I would just say, generally we're technology neutral. So the type of technology that's being deployed, we leave that up to entities. We set construction standards, the speed standards. And so for this program, that's why we're saying construction has to be at least 25.3. But as Jannine already noted, we do not consider mobile to be broadband service. So that's the one kind of caveat to technology that folks should keep in mind.
Okay, thank you. And so some of the more technical questions, maybe the general field representatives, the map that you showed up, those would be the right people to direct those types of questions to. So another question we have is, technical assistance was mentioned. Is there technical assistance available for states to develop a broadband plan?
That's a great question, and I wish I could say yes. The offerings that we have at USDA are dictated by law. So while we do have a lot of funds available, it's all for infrastructure, and it does not allow us to do hands-on with state governments. However, I think Department of Commerce is a great resource for that. They, like I said, they have the State Broadband Leaders Network, and the team over there is very, very interested in helping state governments to develop one. For the sake of this, of the points for this particular program, the type of plan that we're looking for certainly would be like in a best practice sort of state, like the way that North Carolina has an excellent state broadband plan, where it sets out goals for connectivity and target areas in education and healthcare. But what we would also accept is an ability for us to see on the web that there is a plan of action at the state level to attack the rural broadband challenge. Laurel, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think you hit it.
Okay. So just to keep moving, because we have several more, wondering if you could maybe elaborate a little bit on the federal to local component that you mentioned, and then also can states subcontract to service providers?
I'll take the first part, and then I'll let Laurel jump in the second part. Federal to local, what we mean by that is the way that we administer all of our rural development programs is applicants at the local level. It might be a telephone cooperative, it might be an electric cooperative, it might be a for-profit telephone company. It might even be a municipality or an economic development authority at the local level that would submit an application directly to USDA. They don't have to go through state government, and when they are awarded the funds and the contract occurs, like Laurel said earlier, the contract is between the federal government and that local entity. So there is no pass through the state, but we would love to keep you all aware and apprised of how how applications come in and how they get awarded in your states. Regarding contracts, Laurel, do you want to jump in on that one?
Yeah, absolutely. So we do allow what I like to call open access networks. So that's essentially we provide funding to an entity. They own the network. They're responsible for operating a network, but they actually subcontract out the operations of that network. And that is fine. That is allowable under all of our programs. There's a couple things I would mention to folks, and we don't normally see this with state governments, but we see this a lot with county or municipalities, is that ultimately it's still the entity that applied that's kind of on the hook for making sure the service is delivered. So even if you're in an open access network and there's a service provider who's delivering it, if there's a contractual concern on our part, I mean, ultimately we're coming back to whoever we have the contractual relationship with. The other thing is, and that's not a problem, when those issues have arisen with the networks that we finance like this, that has not been a problem, but I just want to make people aware of that. The other thing that I would mention is that we want to see in your application that you have a service provider identified and they have the relevant experience and knowledge to do this. So if you are, or you know someone that's going to apply for the ReConnect program or really any of our programs, and they're willing to own the facilities, but they want a third party to provide the service, we are going to want to see that service agreement in the application so that we have confidence in who it is that's going to be running the network and that, you know, that's in place, because that's a big component of a successful application or a successful award.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. So does the letter regarding state broadband activity have to come from the governor, or can it come from a different appropriate state official?
Would need to come from the governor's office.
Okay. And will there be a review of eligibility criteria and other program elements after the first round of funding is allocated?
That's a great question, and let me clarify something on the first answer before I jump into that one. When I say governor's office, for instance, at the state of Georgia, the governor's office might be the governor's office proper, but it also could be the governor's office of, in certain circumstances, governor's office of highway safety or governor's office of education achievement. So there might be subsidiaries of the governor's office, and that would be acceptable as long as it is part of the general governor's office. Related to criteria, yes, we're gonna review after we get all the applications in and begin awarding funds to applicants that meet our financial, engineering, business case, and scoring criteria. We're going to reevaluate any ways that we can tweak any rules of the program to make it more effective for rural communities. So Congress has given us a good deal of flexibility to be nimble and responsive to rural communities, and we're excited about that. Laurel, do you want to add anything?
No.
All right, thank you. So just a few more questions. I know we're coming up on time. For the 20 points that states can sort of help applicants with, are those all or nothing points? Can you receive, 7 out of 10 or 3 out of 5?
Laurel, I'll let you take that one.
Yeah, so basically for each of the 3 budget categories, it's all or nothing. So for instance, for the state broadband plan, you can either get 10 points for it or you can get 0 points for it. Same thing with the restriction of utilities from providing broadband, or the last one on expediting right of way and ER. So an applicant could maybe get points for 2 of those 3 criteria, or 1 of the 3 criteria, or all 3. But they're either going to get, for each of those criteria, 0 or 10, 0, 5, 0, 5.
Okay, thank you. And will the ReConnect program place restrictions on purchasing foreign-made products, for example, from Huawei or ZTE?
So that's a great question, and essentially we have Buy American requirements under the program, and so we would sort of refer back to those. We don't maintain a list of materials or a list of approved contractors or vendors, but we do have Buy American requirements. There are waiver requests that are allowed for under Buy American, and so there are some cases when we allow folks because, for instance, you couldn't find a domestic option. But essentially, we don't maintain who the eligible equipment manufacturers are, but we do require that our awardees comply with Buy American.
Okay, thank you. And one final question. So if a state was interested in having USDA come do a training session to help them, really reach some of those very hard to reach locations or organizations, who would they make that request to?
Great question. We have a lot of requests for something similar because it is so important, and we we want to be as helpful as we possibly can. We've set up these 6 webinars, 4 of them announced so far, at places where they're geographically dispersed across the country. And like, for instance, even the one in Pennsylvania is in Pennsylvania, but it's very close to Ohio, West Virginia, and even Virginia. So it can be accessed by multiple states. Where we might have a governor who's interested in having a state-specific focus, that request should be submitted to our USDA Intergovernmental Affairs Office. And maybe, Patricio, you could field those and submit those over to our Intergovernmental Office. And then what we would do is ascertain our ability to do that on the time frame that the governor's office might have it. We've got resources spread throughout the country. We are spread a little bit thinly, so we do have to prioritize, but we also want to make sure we're meeting timelines that you all have. So if you've got that request, in fact, I think there might be one that's occurring in New Mexico. The way we're going to be able to do that is through our state director, our rural development state director in New Mexico, working with the general field representative to have a sort of a seminar or summit conference, mini conference sort of thing. Believe that we could, if there's other requests from other states, we could definitely look at our ways to do something similar for you.
Okay, great. That's helpful. And just to add, NGA would be more than happy to help facilitate that connection with USDA's Intergovernmental Affairs Office. So that's kind of where we are with all the questions. If you have any more that come up, later, or you're rewatching the recording, feel free to shoot me an email, and I can connect you with Jannine or Laurel. So with that, I just wanted to thank Jannine and Laurel for this great overview and for answering all of our questions today. And thank you all for joining.
Thank you guys so much.
Thanks, everyone.